Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's a sad affair when there's no one there. He calls out in the night.
We are failing some of our most vulnerable children. That was the statement of the Prime Minister today as he introduced new plans to strip some local authorities of their role in child protection. Experts are already being sent in to take over children's services in Sunderland after inspectors there found serious and widespread failings. And similar action is to be taken in Norfolk and Sandwell. Norfolk County Council says it is getting good results and the number of children in care is falling. Sandwell Council says it welcomes the appointment of a commissioner because it's working hard to make improvements. The Education and Children's Services Inspectorate, Ofsted, says there are more councils failing children than there are succeeding, as Jane Death now reports.
For some children, their only parent is the state. Sunderland Council has been failing as a parent. There have been serious inquiries into baby Penny, who fell and drowned in the bath, and baby Nicola, who was hurt by her father. The government has taken children's services out of Sunderland's hands.
We've in Sunderland had some bad practice, and happily we've got the experts in there now to help us weed it out.
Experts from better councils or children's charities could be heading for Sandwell in the West Midlands, where inspectors found children at risk of sexual exploitation aren't always being protected. And Norfolk, where the council lost touch with 190 children when they left care, including vulnerable 16 and 17-year-olds.
I don't think any local authority or any person up and down the country would say we're doing the right thing by not tackling failure. If Ofsted identify inadequacy, I think it's absolutely our duty as a government to respond to that and to bring in people from outside who will provide that challenge.
The government's taken children's services away from councils before. Doncaster was the first, although 11 months after an independent trust took over, it was still failing, according to Ofsted. Slough was taken over 2 months ago after an earlier inspection found failures left children being harmed. Now experts are going into Sunderland immediately to sort out the serious failings there. A voluntary trust will take over. And new leaders will also be going into Norfolk and Sandwell with a view to taking them over within a year. Kavani Kanda was 9 when she was taken into care, not much older than her 2 boys are now. She says the system she grew up in hasn't really changed.
Until those working within the care system see me as a young person or as a person and don't see me as a caseload, things are never going to change. You know, you treat a caseload very different to how you would treat your own child. So I think that's where we're kind of getting things slightly wrong.
No more will children's social services be allowed to fester. Failing departments will have 6 months to improve, or they could be taken over and staff sacked. Professor Ray Jones was appointed by the government to oversee work with children in Sandwell and 4 other councils. He says funding is failing.
Right across the country there's a real difficulty now in providing good child protection services. A 70% increase in child protection workloads over the last 6 years, at the same time as big cuts in local government budgets. It doesn't make for the best arrangements in terms of protecting children anywhere.
The government talks about ending the cycle of failure, but the cycle of women having their children taken away at birth has got dramatically worse, from hundreds to thousands of babies each year.
Currently, there's very little being done post-proceedings when the court proceedings finish in order to support that woman with that loss and to put her life back together and maybe to be able to bring about the changes that are required for either for her to decide not to have more children or for her to be able to successfully parent those children.
Most social workers have probably never worked harder or under more scrutiny, but the number of councils rated as good at protecting children are still outnumbered by those who are failing.
Jane Death. Well, now our social affairs editor, Jackie Long, is with us. So will today's developments get children's services back on track?
Well, children in care, the clue is in the title. Children taken into the care of the state, mainly because abuse and neglect at the hands of their own family. The state is effectively their parent, And it is clear today, and it has been clear for some time, that that parent, the state, is failing in its most basic duty towards these children, unable even to keep them safe from harm. As we heard in Jane's piece, Ofsted have rated 2/3 of children's services across the country as in need of improvement. The government says today it's going to take a much tougher line on these failing children's services. They will be in danger of being taken over. David Cameron has acknowledged the failures and has vowed to put it right, but it is a bold promise.
Well, and how big a task is it?
Well, let's look at some of the challenges faced by the government on this. As Jane said in the piece, you have the number of children on child protection orders. They've doubled since the death of baby P. We see new figures today showing a huge rise in the number of newborns being taken into care. But what do we do with these children once they are in care? We know that outcomes for children who've been in care are a national shame, if not a national scandal. 66% have special educational needs compared to 17% of those children who are not in care. 85% get below grade C, maths and English at GCSE, compared to 42% of the wider young population. And 41% are not in education, employment or training. That is, they are literally doing nothing. And those figures have remained stubbornly around those levels for the last few years. In fact, the number of care leavers who are at university this year has actually gone down. So what we have today is a lot of emphasis on what local authorities are doing, but it's worth bearing in mind in a damning report from the Public Accounts Committee earlier this year that they laid the blame squarely at the door of the Department for Education, saying they had responsibility for these children and had shown an alarming reluctance to play an active role in improving services and securing a better future for these children. Now, the government might argue today that this is the beginning of the turnaround. Let's see.
Well, one man who knows well the flaws in dealing with children in care is the poet Lem Cisse. He spent the first 16 years of his life with foster parents and in children's homes. Now, Chancellor of Manchester University, he wants to change perceptions around care leavers, from troublemakers to superhero figures, like their fictional counterparts in the movies, the likes of Harry Potter or the X-Men. Lem, with the help of the graffiti artist Axix, explains why he feels that way.
In my 18 years in the care system, I met thousands of young people who were under great stress and pressure. Considering they were away from their families and traumatised, the way that they dealt with their daily lives is on a par with superheroes. When I was about 16 years old, I ran away barefoot down the East Lancs Road to the city, to Manchester. It was the engine of my future, and I needed to get close to it. It's funny, you take for granted being, knowing yourself, who your parents are and what have you, but I didn't have parents, I didn't have family. So, how would I know about cocoa butter that you put on your skin to stop yourself going grey? How would I know how to look after my hair? It was the strangest thing. I did not know about who I was. My poems are tattooed throughout this city. There's one on Tib Street, which is a mile-long poem that's where my verses are laid into the ground and the signatures at the bottom. There's the first one on Hardy's Well, one inside the university, Let There Be Peace, and there's Rain, the poem Rain, which reads, when the rain falls, they talk of Manchester. But when the triumphant rain falls, we see rainbows. Sounds quite simple, but the way it's written is where the letters go beneath each other like rainfall.
My name's Keela, from Halifax. I'm studying in Huddersfield at the moment. Oh my God. Oh,
that is
wow.
amazing. You look amazing. You look amazing.
I like your hair on it.
Do you like it?
Whoa.
Oh my gosh.
That
I
is
like
so
how you
cool.
look.
I went into care when I was 10 years old. My mum was a drug user, so obviously when she was under the influences, she didn't care what was going on around her. She was very careless in general. Me and my brother did pretty much whatever we wanted. I didn't remember seeing her all that much. I mean, she was there, she was just in her bedroom a lot.
What do people think of the foster child?
I think they associate them with criminals. There's no clear signs that would say, oh, she looks like she's in foster care. And I didn't misbehave at school or anything. And I think that's what they expected, when not everyone's like that.
The reason that I can see that they are superheroes like the X-Men, like Superman, like Spider-Man, like Cinderella, they were flawed, you know? They were flawed. Harry Potter ran away from home, just like many of the young people in the children's homes ran away from home. You know, it's a natural thing to do if you feel unsafe, if you feel there are dementors nearby, like Harry Potter did. This isn't some great projection. That's the fact, it's in the writing.
I can't think of a superhero who wasn't adopted right now or fostered, which I think is quite cool actually. A good example is Spider-Man, because he had to live with his family because he couldn't live with his parents, and they all have this amazing adventure, and it is because they are in foster care.
Have you got anything that you've had all of your life?
I had a massive collection of teddies. Oh, I loved them, but I don't think so. The only thing I've ever kept the same is my ponytail. Ever since I was young, I've had a ponytail in my hair.
Well, I couldn't take my toys when I went into the children's homes, and I've never forgot it. It was just toys in the boxes of my foster parents, and they wouldn't let me take my own toys. It does make me angry that we don't make the connection, right? We become blind to the connection. We look at the foster child as if they're a criminal, as if they're a bad person, as if something will go wrong with them because they're not settled, because they're a threat to our own structure. And then we'll go home and read to our children books about Harry Potter and not make the connection.
Well, shortly before we came on air, I spoke to the Minister for Children and Families, Edward Timpson, and I began by asking him what had been announced today that would make any difference to the failures in looking after children in care.
We made sure that through the innovation programme, £100 million, and also through another £100 million that we're investing today into getting high calibre graduates into social work, making sure that we're creating the conditions that excellent social work, which is the thing that really makes a difference to children's lives, can flourish. And yes, we are finding it increasingly hard to make sure that we can balance the books, but it's something that we have to do, and councils have to play their part. Some of the highest performing councils are some of the lowest spenders, and so there's more we can do to reform the system so that all those social workers going into the profession right now can feel confident that they get the support, but also the freedom to use their professional judgment.
This does, in the end, fall upon local authorities to provide. Now, some local authorities, as you've said, do better than others. But nevertheless, unless there is a national input of money ring-fenced for nothing else but for these vulnerable children, these 70,000 children in care, I cannot see what can change. I cannot see what can change.
Well, we have consistently over the last 5 years seen around £5 billion spent on child protection and children's services. But what today is also trying to do is work with councils to say, yes, you can do more with that money.
And when you hear a Prime Minister say what Mr Cameron said, these children are in our care. We, the state, are their parents. And what are we setting them up for? The dole, the streets, or an early grave? Now, he is putting that absolutely as a massive national priority. today does not sound like a response to that priority.
Well, this is a very firm response to that very passionate speech that the Prime Minister gave at our conference. It is, as he said, a landmark for this Parliament, and there will be much more to come, John, on this issue, particularly around social work reform and how we attract the brightest and the best into social work. So we have not only a great social workforce going forward, but also the leaders of the future, so that we can have consistency in every children's service.
Can you give us an undertaking that this will remain the responsibility and the work will be done by local authorities, social services, not by some incoming conglomerate?
We ruled out any profit making from child protection in the last Parliament, but what we want to do is to make sure that those like Barnardo's, NSPCC, Catch 22, we want to open that out so that we are ensuring that we are building on everything that we know works.
Are children safer today than they were 3.5 years ago when you became a minister?
I believe that we've put in a system that gives it a greater prospect that children are safer than today. We've seen more children taken into care. That may suggest that decisions are being made to protect them before any more neglect or abuse could be done to them.
The whole question of how long you stay in care has become more elastic. Local authorities are saying, that's all very well, but we can't fund the care between 18 and 21 because the government's never given it to us.
Well, what we did is we introduced for the first time what's called the staying put arrangements, which means children in foster care can, if they want to, stay with their foster family beyond the age of 18 up to 21. And we've
spoken to kids that have been thrown out because the foster parents can no longer afford between that 18 and 21 to keep the kids at home. We've spoken to others who have not been able to continue in education because they couldn't get the money or the grants to do so.
Well, we will look at all the individual cases where the commitment that policy has brought in is not being fulfilled. But we are seeing significantly more young people taking up that opportunity. And I know from my own family how important it is that we don't just use the age of a young person because a birthday has come round to say that they have to move on from their foster home. That's why we brought in this huge and significant change, and one that we will look and continue to review, but has made already a significant difference to many young people's lives.
Minister, thank you very much indeed for talking. Timpson talking to me earlier. Well, joining us now are the poet and writer Lem Cisse, who was fostered and brought up in 4 different children's homes. You saw him in that film earlier. Poppy Noor, who was also in care and is now training to be a social worker. And from Westminster, Conservative MP Lucy Allen, who sits on the Education Select Committee. Let me start with you, Poppy Noor. The Prime Minister said this: I tell you, this shames our country and we will put it right. From what you've heard today, is it going to happen?
I think, in my opinion, the main thing is that these things don't happen in silos. So saying that, realising that there's a problem in care and for the outcomes for children in care, and therefore saying, well, let's change the management of certain councils. It doesn't look at the reasons behind that. So from my own experience, having EMA taken away from me, if I had EMA taken away from me, which was done in 2010,
EMA.
Educational maintenance allowance, that helped me go to school when I was in care. It meant I could get transport. When that was removed, that takes money from young people who are in care. When housing benefit, the proposals to have that removed.
Let me pick that up exactly with Lucy Allen. I mean, you've worked in child protection and the rest of it in a local authority before you became an MP. So what about the removal of this maintenance grant for education? Clearly, that has to be restored, doesn't it?
Well, I think one of the concerns that I really do have around current government thinking is the fact that we've just heard Edward Timpson say that increasing the numbers of children in care is a good thing, and I disagree with that. And I would like to see a commitment to reducing the numbers of children in care through therapeutic intervention at an early stage so that we can give children a better start in life, safer at home.
Cisse, you're looking pretty sceptical at that.
Yeah, well, the the whole idea of care is that a child comes because they're in need. So what you seem to be saying is that you will stop the child being in need and you'll stop the trauma in the family before they come into care. That shouldn't be your issue. Your issue should be that when a child comes into our care, we welcome them, we rehabilitate, we educate, we give them love, kindness and a place which feels safe.
It does sound very much, Poppy, that what one is talking about is not reducing the number of people in care. Indeed, there may be needing to be more children in care, who knows, but doing better by them once they are in care.
I mean, I think it's both. It's interesting because also as a trainee social worker, it does feel like giving with one hand and taking with the other. I mean, first of all, the government cut legal aid, so I don't know really. I don't understand how they expect parents to adequately stand up for themselves when they can't be represented. First of all, and I think in terms of where's the money? It's in terms of outcomes for children in care and really making this a government agenda. It's not about simply saying we're going to get other people to come in and run your councils because you're not doing a good enough job. What about making it a beneficial career to go into financially, and also what about putting more funding into children's homes and actually where it matters?
Surely from your experience, Lucy Allen, money is a big issue, isn't it? I mean, you do need more money in the system.
I think that money needs to be used in a really productive way, and I think just simply thinking the solution is to take more and more children into care without actually addressing some of the therapeutic needs that children might actually have once they're in the care system ends up with these children sometimes having a terribly tragic experience where they will end up having their own children taken from them because their therapeutic needs are not met. And I think very often if we would to target money and focus it on addressing some of the needs of mothers, of children who are leaving the care system at an early stage, then we would actually find that the cost issue is less of a problem.
Lem Cisse, we saw you in that film, and I mean,
Yes.
what the extraordinary story of your life, parentless, is that you've gone from care to being the Chancellor of Manchester University. I mean,
Yes, I have.
What went right?
Well, if you see success as being Chancellor of a university in Manchester, that's a good thing. But saying that without a family is a different thing altogether. I always viewed success as the ability to be able to look into the mirror, see myself and know that I'm okay. And that's where I've always measured my success from. And it's taken a lifetime to get even close to that. So I'm not looking for pity. I'm a pretty independent person, and you are forced to be independent at a very early age if you're brought up in care. But my view of success are not my doctorates, not my MBA, and not my University of Manchester life. My success is of being a good person to myself in spite, not because of what has happened to me.
Very briefly, Poppy, your experience the same?
Of being in
care and managing to make it?
I mean, I would say that it would have been a lot easier if my parents didn't have their benefits being docked from them, if I had a youth centre that I could go to, if I had housing benefit, which young children won't have now, and they didn't have to be homeless. All of that stuff really helps in becoming successful, I think, a home, an education and a family.
Poppy and Lem, both, thank you very much indeed.